Jake Thompson stared at the file on his dashboard, rain drumming against his windshield like impatient fingers. $15,000. That's what Daniel Park owed to Pinnacle Financial Services, and Jake's job was to get every penny back. He'd been doing this work for 8 years now, and he'd learned that people would say anything to avoid paying their debts. They'd cry, they'd beg, they'd make promises they had no intention of keeping. But Jake had heard it all before. The house at 247 Maple Street looked ordinary enough. A small 2-story home with a white picket fence and a garden that had seen better days. The lawn needed cutting, and there were newspapers piled up by the front door. Jake grabbed his leather folder and stepped out into the drizzle, pulling his coat collar up against the cold morning air. This was supposed to be a simple case. Daniel Park had taken out a loan 6 months ago to save his struggling restaurant. The payments had been coming in regularly at first, but then they stopped completely 2 months ago. No phone calls returned, no response to letters. Jake's boss, Mr. Vincent, had given him the green light to pursue aggressive collection methods if necessary. Jake had done his homework. Daniel Park, 32 years old, married, owned a small Korean restaurant called Soul Kitchen that had closed permanently last month. No criminal record, no history of dodging debts. Just another small business owner who'd bitten off more than he could chew. Jake had seen it 1,000 times before, especially after the pandemic hit. Good people making bad financial decisions. When they were desperate, he walked up the cracked concrete path and pressed the doorbell. Nothing. He tried again, holding it longer this time. Still nothing. Jake was about to knock when he heard footsteps from inside, slow and hesitant. A woman's voice called out, muffled by the door. "Who is it?" "I'm looking for Daniel Park. I'm here about a financial matter." There was a long pause. Jake could hear the sound of multiple locks being undone. The door opened just a crack, held by a security chain. A young woman peered out, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked like she'd been crying. "Daniel's not here," she said quietly. "Are you Mrs. Park?" "I'm Jake Thompson from Pinnacle Financial Services. I need to speak with your husband about his account." The woman's face crumpled and she began to cry. Not the fake tears Jake had seen from other debtors, but real, heartbroken sobs that made his stomach twist uncomfortably. "He's gone?" she whispered. "Daniel's gone?" Jake frowned. "Gone? Did he move out? I need a forwarding address if he's relocated." "No." "You don't understand?" The woman opened the door wider, and Jake got his first full look at her. She was wearing a wedding dress, wrinkled and slightly stained, hanging loose around her small frame. But it was her rounded belly that stopped Jake cold. She was very pregnant, maybe 7 or 8 months along. "Daniel died 3 weeks ago," she said, her voice breaking. "Car accident on the highway. The funeral was last Tuesday." Jake stood frozen on the doorstep, his prepared speech about payment plans and legal consequences dying in his throat. He'd been a debt collector for 8 years, and he'd never encountered anything like this. The woman in front of him wasn't a deadbeat trying to skip out on payments. She was a grieving widow who looked like she was barely holding herself together. "I'm sorry," Jake said, and meant it. "I had no idea. I'm Lisa, right? Lisa Park?" She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "How did you know about Daniel's debt? He never told me about any loan." Jake looked down at his folder, suddenly feeling like the papers inside were made of lead. "Mrs. Park, your husband, borrowed $15,000 from our company 6 months ago. He put the loan under his name only, so you wouldn't have been notified about it." Lisa's legs seemed to give out, and she grabbed the doorframe for support. "15,000? But that's impossible. Daniel said our finances were fine. He said the restaurant was just going through a rough patch, but that everything would be okay." "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this," Jake said gently, "but your husband's last payment was 2 months ago. That's why I'm here." Lisa stared at him in shock, one hand pressed to her swollen belly. "I don't understand." "We don't have that kind of money. Daniel's life insurance barely covered the funeral costs. I'm living off our savings, and that's almost gone too." Jake had been trained to stay focused on the debt, to not get emotionally involved with the debtor's personal situations. But looking at this pregnant woman in her wedding dress, standing in the doorway of a house she might lose, he felt something crack inside his chest. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Maybe we can figure something out." Lisa hesitated, then stepped aside. The inside of the house was neat but sparse. Wedding photos lined the mantelpiece, showing a happy couple who looked like they had their whole lives ahead of them. There were baby items scattered around the living room, a half-assembled crib in the corner, and boxes of tiny clothes stacked on the sofa. "I was going through Daniel's things," Lisa explained, noticing Jake's gaze. "I found our wedding album, and I just thought I wanted to feel close to him. I know it's silly, wearing the dress." "It's not silly," Jake said, and he meant it. "Grief makes us do whatever we need to do to get through the day." Lisa sat down heavily on the couch, her hands resting on her belly. "I'm due in 6 weeks. I work part-time at the library, but I had to take leave because of pregnancy complications. I'm studying to be a nurse, but I can't afford to continue school now. I don't even know how I'm going to pay for the baby's delivery." Jake sat across from her, his folder still unopened. In 8 years of collecting debts, he'd never sat down with a debtor like this. Usually he was standing on doorsteps, making demands and threats, but this felt different. This felt like he was intruding on someone's private pain. "What kind of restaurant did Daniel have?" Jake asked. Lisa's face brightened slightly. "Korean food, his grandmother's recipes. He was so proud of that place. He'd work 16-hour days, trying to make it successful. I begged him to slow down, especially when I got pregnant, but he said he was doing it for us, for our family." Jake thought about the loan documents in his folder. Daniel Park had listed his restaurant as collateral, but the business was worth nothing now. The equipment had probably been sold to pay other creditors. All that was left was this house, and a pregnant woman who didn't even know she was in debt. "Mrs. Park," Jake said carefully, "I need to ask you something important. Did Daniel ever mention any other debts? Credit cards, other loans, anything like that?" Lisa shook her head. "He handled all our finances. He said I should focus on my studies and the baby. I trusted him completely." She looked up at Jake with desperate eyes. "What happens now? Are you going to take our house?" Jake stared at her, his mind racing. According to company policy, he should be explaining the legal process, the timeline for asset seizure, the wage garnishment procedures. But looking at this woman, he couldn't bring himself to say the words that would destroy what was left of her world. "Let me make some calls," he said finally. "There might be options we can explore." It was a lie, and Jake knew it. But for the first time in his career, he couldn't bring himself to tell the truth about what came next. Jake sat in his car outside the Park house for 20 minutes, staring at his phone. He told Lisa he would make some calls, but he knew exactly what his boss would say. Vincent Torres didn't care about sob stories or pregnant widows. He cared about results, and $15,000 was $15,000. Finally, Jake dialed the office number. Vincent answered on the second ring. "Thompson, please tell me you've got good news about the Park account." "It's complicated," Jake said, watching raindrops slide down his windshield. "Daniel Park is dead. Died in a car accident 3 weeks ago." "So? Death doesn't cancel debt. What about the widow?" "What assets are we looking at?" Jake closed his eyes. "She's pregnant, very pregnant. And she had no idea about the loan. Not our problem," Vincent said coldly. "File the paperwork, start the asset seizure process. If she can't pay, we'll take the house." "Vincent, she's about to have a baby. She's all alone, and she's what? Poor? Sad? Thompson, I've heard this song before. You're going soft on me. Get the money or get the assets. That's the job." The line went dead. Jake stared at his phone, feeling sick to his stomach. He'd been doing this work for 8 years, and he'd never questioned it before. People borrowed money, they paid it back. Simple. But sitting here, thinking about Lisa and her wedding dress, he couldn't see anything simple about it. His phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. "Status report by 5 p.m., no excuses." Jake walked back to the house, his steps heavy. Lisa answered the door quickly, hope written across her face. Did you reach someone? Can they help? Jake looked at her and felt something break inside his chest. Can I come in? We need to talk. Lisa's face fell, but she stepped aside. She'd changed out of the wedding dress into a simple blue maternity dress, but her eyes were still red from crying. It's bad news, isn't it? She said, sinking onto the couch. Jake sat across from her, his folder open on the coffee table. Mrs. Park, I need to be honest with you. My company doesn't make exceptions for personal circumstances. When someone can't pay a debt, we have legal options to recover the money. What kind of legal options? We can seize assets. Bank accounts, property, anything of value. Jake's voice was barely above a whisper, including this house. Lisa's hand flew to her throat. This house, but this is all I have. This is where Daniel and I were going to raise our baby. All our memories are here. I know, I'm sorry. Lisa stood up abruptly and began pacing, her hands pressed to her lower back. I don't understand. How could Daniel do this? How could he borrow money without telling me? We promised each other we'd make all big decisions together. Jake watched her pace, noting how she winced with each step. How long have you been married? 2 years. We met at the community college. I was taking English classes and Daniel was in business management. He was so excited about the restaurant. His grandmother had taught him all these traditional recipes, and he wanted to share them with people. Lisa's voice broke. He worked so hard. Every single day he was there before dawn, staying until midnight. I barely saw him the last few months. Where are you from originally? The Philippines. I came here 5 years ago for school. My family is still back home. They don't have money to help me, and I can't afford to go back there with a baby. Lisa sat back down, her breathing labored. I don't have anyone here except some friends from work. Jake felt a knot forming in his stomach. What about Daniel's family? His parents died when he was young. That's why the restaurant meant so much to him. It was his connection to his grandmother, to his heritage. Lisa wiped her eyes with a tissue. I keep thinking he must have been so scared, so desperate. He probably thought he could fix everything before I found out. What's your plan? I mean, after the baby comes? Lisa laughed bitterly. What plan? I work part-time at the library, 20 hours a week. I make barely enough to cover groceries. I was supposed to graduate from nursing school next year, but I can't afford the tuition now. I don't know how I'm going to pay for the baby's delivery, let alone raise a child alone. Jake opened his folder and pulled out the loan documents. Mrs. Park, I need to show you something. This is your husband's signature on the loan agreement. Lisa took the papers with shaking hands. I can't believe he signed this. The interest rate is 30%. That's insane. It's a high-risk loan. Most banks won't lend to struggling restaurants. But $15,000? What did he spend it on? Jake had wondered the same thing. According to our records, he used it to pay suppliers and keep the restaurant running. The loan was supposed to tide him over until business picked up. Lisa stared at the documents, tears dropping onto the pages. He never told me how bad things were. I thought we were just going through a rough patch. I offered to quit school and work full-time, but he said no. He said he wanted me to focus on my education and the baby. He was trying to protect you. By lying to me? By putting our home at risk? Lisa's voice rose and she immediately pressed a hand to her belly. Sorry, I need to stay calm. The doctor said stress isn't good for the baby. Jake leaned forward. Mrs. Park, I need to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest. Do you have any money saved? Any assets I don't know about? Lisa shook her head. We had about $3,000 in savings. Most of that went to funeral expenses. I have maybe $800 left. What about life insurance? Daniel had a small policy through his work, but it was only enough to cover the funeral and pay off our credit cards. There's nothing left. Jake closed his folder, his mind racing. He'd been trained to look for hidden assets, to pressure debtors into finding money they claimed they didn't have. But looking at Lisa, he knew she was telling the truth. There was no money, there were no assets except this house, and even that was probably mortgaged. How much time do I have? Lisa asked quietly. For what? Before you take the house. How much time do I have to figure something out? Jake had filed dozens of asset seizure cases. He knew the timeline by heart. Legally, we have to give you 30 days notice. But Mrs. Park, I have to be honest with you. Unless you can come up with $15,000 plus interest and fees, you're going to lose this house. Lisa nodded, her face pale. Okay, 30 days. Maybe I can find another job, or maybe I can sell some things. Jake looked around the modest living room. There was nothing here worth selling. A few pieces of furniture, some electronics, wedding gifts that might bring in a few $100s at most. Mrs. Park, Jake said carefully, I don't want to give you false hope. $15,000 is a lot of money. Even if you found a full-time job tomorrow, you couldn't earn that much in 30 days. Lisa looked at him with desperate eyes. Then what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? I'm due in 6 weeks. I can't be homeless with a newborn baby. Jake stared at her, his heart pounding. For the first time in his career, he didn't have an answer. He was supposed to be the one with solutions, the one who made things happen. But sitting here, looking at this pregnant woman who was about to lose everything, he felt completely helpless. I don't know, he said finally. I honestly don't know. Jake sat in his office the next morning, staring at his computer screen. The asset seizure form was open, cursor blinking in the first field. All he had to do was type Lisa Park's name and address, and the legal process would begin. In 30 days, she'd be homeless with a newborn baby. His phone rang. Vincent's name flashed on the screen. Thompson, I need that Park paperwork filed today. No more delays. I'm working on it, Jake said, his finger hovering over the keyboard. Work faster. We've got 20 other cases backing up, and I need you focused. Jake hung up and closed the form. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. His assistant, Carol, looked up from her desk. Where are you going? Vincent wanted to see you at lunch. Tell him I'm doing a follow-up on the Park case. Making sure we get accurate asset information. It was a lie, but Jake didn't care. 20 minutes later, he was standing on Lisa's doorstep again. When she opened the door, he could see she'd been crying. Jake? Is everything okay? Did something happen with the loan? No, nothing like that. I just wanted to check on you. See how you're doing. Lisa looked confused but stepped aside to let him in. The house seemed even smaller in the daylight. Jake noticed a stack of bills on the kitchen counter, all marked with red final notice stamps. Are you okay? He asked, noticing how pale she looked. I had a doctor's appointment yesterday. The baby's fine, but my blood pressure is high. The doctor says it's stress. Lisa sat down carefully on the couch. I've been trying to figure out what to do. I called 3 different lawyers, but they all want money up front that I don't have. Jake felt a stab of guilt. He was the source of her stress, the reason her blood pressure was spiking. What did the lawyer say? That I might be able to fight it in court, but it would take months and cost thousands of dollars. Even if I won, the legal fees would probably cost more than the original debt. Jake nodded. He'd seen it before. People spending more money trying to fight debt collectors than the debt was worth. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, Lisa continued. About Daniel being scared and desperate. I found some things in his office last night. She handed Jake a shoebox filled with papers. Restaurant receipts, supplier invoices, loan rejection letters from banks. Jake flipped through them, getting a clearer picture of what Daniel had been facing. Look at this, Lisa said, pulling out a bank statement. 3 months ago, Daniel was barely making enough to cover the rent on the restaurant. He was using credit cards to pay suppliers. I think he knew the business was failing, but he didn't want to admit it. Jake studied the documents. Daniel had been drowning financially for months before he took the loan. The $15,000 had been a desperate attempt to save a business that was already beyond saving. He must have felt so alone, Lisa said quietly. I wish he'd told me. We could have figured something out together. Jake looked at her, this woman who was about to lose everything, feeling sorry for the husband who'd lied to her. It was the kind of forgiveness that most people couldn't manage. Mrs. Park, can I ask you something personal? Call me Lisa, and yes, what is it? Why aren't you angry? Most people in your situation would be furious at their spouse. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. I am angry. But I'm also scared and sad and confused. Daniel made a mistake, but he made it trying to provide for our family. Being angry won't change anything now. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Status update. Now, I need to get back to the office, Jake said, standing up. But Lisa, I want you to know something. The 30-day clock hasn't started yet. I haven't filed the paperwork. Lisa's eyes widened. You haven't? But I thought I'm supposed to. But I haven't. That buys you a little more time. Why are you helping me? Jake looked at her, this pregnant woman in her modest living room, surrounded by the ruins of her life. Because it's the right thing to do. Over the next week, Jake found himself driving by Lisa's house every day. He told himself he was monitoring the situation, but the truth was more complicated. He was worried about her. She was alone, pregnant, and under enormous stress. Someone needed to check on her. On Thursday, he noticed her struggling to bring groceries in from her car. Without thinking, he pulled over and helped her carry the bags inside. You don't have to do this, Lisa said, but she looked grateful. It's no trouble. Jake noticed she was buying generic brands, the cheapest options available. Her grocery bill was probably $20, barely enough food for a few days. How are you feeling? He asked. Tired. The baby's getting bigger, and I'm not sleeping. Well, I keep having nightmares about being homeless with a newborn. Jake's chest tightened. Maybe you should stay with friends for a while. Just until you figure things out? Lisa shook her head. I can't burden anyone else with my problems. And besides, this is my home. Daniel and I picked out every piece of furniture together. We painted the nursery ourselves. I can't just walk away from all of that. She showed him the nursery, a small room painted soft yellow with a crib that was only half assembled. Daniel had apparently been working on it the week before he died. I can't figure out how to finish it, Lisa said. Daniel was always the handy one. Jake knelt down and looked at the instruction manual. I think I can help with this if you want. The next hour, Jake worked on assembling the crib while Lisa sat in the rocking chair, watching. They talked about small things, the baby's due date, Lisa's favorite foods, how she'd met Daniel. It was the most normal conversation Jake had had in months. There, Jake said, tightening the last screw. All done. Lisa ran her hand along the crib rail, tears in her eyes. Thank you. Daniel would have loved knowing someone finished this for him. Jake's phone rang. Vincent again. Thompson, where the hell are you? I've been trying to reach you all afternoon. I'm following up on the Park case, making sure we have accurate information. It's been a week. How much information do you need? File the damn paperwork. I need a few more days. The situation is complicated. Everything's complicated, Thompson. That's why we have lawyers. Get it done. Jake hung up, his stomach churning. Lisa was looking at him with concern. Is everything okay? My boss is getting impatient. He wants me to move forward with the legal process. Lisa nodded, her face resigned. I understand. You have a job to do. Lisa, I want you to know that I'm going to try to buy you as much time as possible. But eventually, I'm going to have to file the paperwork. My job depends on it. I know. And I'm grateful for everything you've done already. You didn't have to help me with the groceries or the crib. You didn't have to be kind to me. Jake looked at her, sitting in the rocking chair in the nursery she'd painted with her dead husband, about to lose everything because of a debt she didn't even know existed. For the first time in his career, he wondered if there were more important things than doing his job. Lisa, what if I told you there might be another way? What if I said I knew someone who might be able to help? Lisa's eyes lit up with hope. What do you mean? Jake took a deep breath. He was about to cross a line he'd never crossed before, but looking at Lisa, he knew he had no choice. Let me make some calls. There might be options we haven't considered. Yet, it was another lie, but this time Jake was determined to make it true. Jake knew he was running out of time. It had been 2 weeks since he'd first met Lisa, and Vincent was asking questions. Real questions, the kind that meant Jake's job was on the line. Thompson, get in here, now. Vincent's voice boomed across the office. Jake's stomach dropped as he walked into his boss's corner office. Vincent was sitting behind his massive desk, Jake's case files spread out in front of him. Sit down, we need to talk. Jake sat, his hands clenched in his lap. Vincent picked up the Park file and waved it in the air. 2 weeks, Thompson. 2 weeks you've been gathering information on this case. Want to explain to me what kind of information takes 2 weeks to gather? The situation is complicated. The debtor is deceased, and the widow is about to have a baby. I'm trying to determine the best approach. Vincent leaned forward, his eyes cold. The best approach is the same approach we use for every case. File the paperwork, seize the assets, collect the debt. It's not rocket science, but she's pregnant and alone. She didn't even know about the debt, so that's not our problem. Her husband signed the papers, she inherited the debt. End of story. Jake shifted in his chair. What if there's another way? What if we could work out a payment plan? Vincent laughed, a harsh sound that made Jake's skin crawl. A payment plan? With what money? You said yourself she's broke. Thompson, I'm starting to think you're getting too involved in this case. I'm just trying to do my job thoroughly. No, you're trying to play hero, and that's not what I pay you for. Vincent stood up and walked around his desk. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully. We are not social workers. We are not therapists. We are debt collectors. Our job is to collect money, not to hold people's hands while they cry about their problems. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. She's not crying about her problems. She's grieving her husband and scared about her future. And that's very sad. But it's not our responsibility. Vincent sat on the edge of his desk, looking down at Jake. You know what? I think you need some help with this case. I'm going to handle it personally. Jake's blood ran cold. That's not necessary. I can handle it. Clearly, you can't. I'm going to visit Mrs. Park tomorrow morning. I'll file the paperwork myself, and we'll have this wrapped up by the end of the week. Vincent, please, just give me a few more days. No, you've had enough time. I should have done this myself from the beginning. Vincent walked back to his chair and sat down, and Thompson, when this is over, we're going to have a serious conversation about your future with this company. Jake left the office feeling like he'd been punched in the stomach. He sat in his car for 10 minutes, trying to figure out what to do. Vincent visiting Lisa would be a disaster. His boss had no patience for sob stories, no sympathy for people in difficult situations. He would destroy her. Jake drove to Lisa's house, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. She answered the door with a smile that faded when she saw his face. Jake? What's wrong? We need to talk. Can I come in? Lisa stepped aside, her hand resting on her belly. She was 8 months pregnant now, moving slowly and carefully. My boss is coming here tomorrow, Jake said without preamble. He's taken over the case. Lisa's face went pale. What does that mean? It means he's going to file the legal paperwork. Immediately. No more delays, no more time to figure things out. He's not like me, Lisa. He doesn't care about your situation. Lisa sank onto the couch, her breathing shallow. Okay, I knew this day would come. What do I need to do? Jake sat beside her, hating himself for what he was about to put her through. He's going to ask you about assets, about money, about anything you might have that's worth something. He'll want to know about your bank accounts, your possessions, everything. But I already told you, I don't have anything. I know that. But he's going to push hard. He might threaten legal action, wage garnishment, things like that. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. What am I supposed to say? Just tell the truth. Don't let him intimidate you. And Lisa ... Jake hesitated. If things get too intense, if he says anything that scares you, tell him you need to speak to a lawyer. That might buy you some time, Lisa nodded, wiping her eyes. Will you be here when he comes? I'll try. But I might not be able to help much. He's my boss. The next morning, Jake arrived at Lisa's house 15 minutes before Vincent was due. To show up, she was wearing a simple black dress, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked nervous but determined. How are you feeling? Jake asked, scared but ready. I've been thinking about what you said about telling the truth. That's all I can do. Vincent's black sedan pulled up to the curb exactly at 10 o'clock. Jake watched his boss get out of the car, straightening his expensive suit jacket. Vincent walked up to the door like he owned the place. Mrs. Park? I'm Vincent Torres from Pinnacle Financial Services. I believe you've been speaking with my employee, Mr. Thompson. Lisa nodded, her voice steady. Yes, please come in. Vincent walked into the living room, his eyes scanning everything like he was appraising it. Jake followed, feeling sick to his stomach. Mrs. Park, I'm here to discuss your late husband's debt. I understand Thompson has been ... accommodating ... But I'm afraid we can't continue to delay this matter. I understand, Lisa said quietly. Vincent sat down and pulled out a folder. Your husband owed us $15,000 plus interest and fees. The total amount is now $17,200. How do you plan to pay this debt? I don't have that kind of money. Then we'll need to discuss asset seizure. This house, for example, what's its current market value? Lisa's voice wavered. I don't know, maybe $80,000? And how much do you owe on the mortgage? About $60,000. Vincent made notes on his papers. So there's $20,000 in equity. That's enough to cover the debt. Jake couldn't stay quiet anymore. Vincent, she's about to have a baby. She has nowhere else to go. Vincent shot him a cold look. Thompson, I didn't ask for your input. But you can't just throw a pregnant woman out of her home. Actually, I can. It's called debt collection. And it's perfectly legal. Vincent turned back to Lisa. Mrs. Park, I'm going to be filing paperwork this afternoon to begin the foreclosure process. You'll have 30 days to vacate the premises. Lisa's hand flew to her throat. 30 days? But I'm due in 2 weeks. That's unfortunate timing, but it's not our responsibility. Jake felt something snap inside him. Vincent, stop. This is insane. Thompson, if you can't handle watching me do my job, you can wait outside. Your job? Your job is destroying people's lives for money? Vincent stood up, his face red with anger. My job is running a business. And your job is whatever I tell. You it is. If you don't like it, you can find another job. Jake looked at Lisa, who was sitting on her couch with tears streaming down her face, one hand on her pregnant belly. He thought about the crib he'd helped assemble, the groceries he'd carried, the way she'd forgiven her husband for lying to her. He thought about the kind of man he'd become, the kind of work he'd been doing for 8 years. You know what, Vincent? You're right, I can find another job. Vincent stared at him. What did you say? Jake pulled out his wallet and counted out the cash inside. $300. Then he pulled out his checkbook and wrote a check for $16,900. It was everything he'd saved for the past 3 years. His down payment for a house, his emergency fund, his entire future. Here's your money, Jake said, handing the check to Vincent. $17,200. The debt is paid in full. Vincent looked at the check in shock. Thompson, what the hell are you doing? I'm quitting, Jake said, turning to Lisa. And I'm making sure you get to keep your home. Lisa stared at him in complete disbelief. Jake, you can't do this. This is all your savings. Yes, I can. And I am, Jake looked at Vincent one last time. Consider this my resignation, effective immediately. Vincent sputtered, trying to find words. You're making a huge mistake, Thompson. You'll never work in this industry again. Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. Good, I never want to work in this industry again. After Vincent left with the check, muttering threats about Jake's career being over, the house fell silent. Lisa sat on the couch, staring at Jake like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. You gave him $17,000. She said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake sat down beside her, feeling strangely calm. Yeah, I did. That was your life savings, wasn't it? Most of it. I had been saving for a house. Lisa started crying then, not the quiet tears Jake had seen before, but deep, shoulder-shaking sobs. I can't let you do this. I can't let you throw away your future from me. Lisa, look at me. Jake waited until she met his eyes. That money was just sitting in a bank account. It wasn't doing anything important. But this, keeping you in your home, making sure you and your baby are safe, that's the most important thing I've ever done with money. But what about your job? What about your career? Jake laughed, surprising himself. What career? I've spent 8 years taking things away from people. I've spent 8 years being the guy everyone dreads seeing on their doorstep. I don't want to be that guy anymore. Lisa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What are you going to do now? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. 2 weeks later, Jake was helping Lisa paint the nursery when her water broke. She was standing on a small stepladder, touching up the yellow walls, when she suddenly went very still. Jake, she said quietly, yeah, I think it's time. Jake looked at her, then at the puddle of water on the floor, and felt his heart start racing. Time for what? The baby? The baby's coming. Jake had imagined this moment, had worried about what would happen when Lisa went into labor. But he'd never expected to be the one driving her to the hospital, holding her hand while she breathed through contractions. It's okay, he kept saying, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. Everything's going to be okay. Lisa squeezed his hand so hard he thought she might break his fingers. Jake, I'm scared. I know. But you're strong, and you're going to be an amazing mother. The labor took 14 hours. Jake stayed in the waiting room, pacing and drinking terrible coffee from the vending machine. He called Lisa's 2 friends from work, and they came to wait with him. He realized he'd never asked Lisa about her friends before, had never thought about who else might care about her. When the nurse finally came out and told them Lisa had delivered a healthy baby girl, Jake felt his knees almost give out with relief. She's asking for you, the nurse said, looking at Jake. She says you're the baby's uncle? Jake followed the nurse down the hall, his heart pounding. He found Lisa in a hospital bed, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in pink. Blankets? Jake, meet Grace, Lisa said, her voice filled with wonder. Grace, this is the man who saved us. Jake looked down at the baby, at her perfect little face and tiny fingers, and felt something shift inside his chest. She's beautiful, Lisa. She's perfect. Do you want to hold her? Jake had never held a newborn before, but he took Grace carefully in his arms. She was so small, so fragile, but when she opened her eyes and looked at him, he felt like she was seeing straight into his soul. Hello, Grace, he whispered. I'm so glad you're here. Over the next few days, Jake barely left the hospital. He brought Lisa meals, helped her with the baby, and slept in the uncomfortable chair next to her bed. The nurses assumed he was the father, and neither Jake nor Lisa bothered to correct them. You don't have to do this, Lisa said on the 3rd day, watching Jake change Grace's diaper. I know you didn't sign up to help raise a baby. Jake looked at her, then at Grace, who was yawning and stretching her tiny arms. Maybe I didn't sign up for it, but I can't imagine being anywhere else. When they finally went home, Jake helped Lisa get settled. He'd spent the 3 days in the hospital thinking about his future, about what he wanted to do with his life. He'd made some calls, sent some emails, and had a few promising leads. I have some news, he told Lisa while she was nursing Grace. I got a job, Lisa looked up, surprised. Already? What kind of job? I'm going to be working for a nonprofit that helps people deal with debt collectors. I'll be teaching people their rights, helping them understand the system, protecting them from companies like the one I used to work for. Lisa's face lit up. Jake, that's perfect. You're going to help people instead of what you used to do. Yeah, and the best part is I can work from home most of the time, so I can help you with Grace. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Are you doing all this because you feel sorry for me? Because you feel guilty about your old job? Jake considered the question seriously. Maybe that's how it started, but Lisa, that's not why I'm here now. I'm here because I care about you and Grace. I'm here because when I think about my future, I can't imagine it without both of you in it. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. I care about you too. More than I probably should. Why shouldn't you? Because I'm a mess. I'm a widow with a newborn baby and no money. I'm still figuring out how to be a single mother. I don't have anything to offer you. Jake moved closer to her on the couch. Lisa, you've given me more than you know. You've given me a reason to be better than I was. You've shown me what it means to forgive people, to see the good in them even when they've made mistakes. You've given me a family. 3 months later, Jake was working at his computer in Lisa's kitchen while Grace napped in her bouncer beside him. Lisa was at the library, back to work part-time, and Jake was handling the baby during the day. It was a routine that worked. For all of them, his phone rang. It was a woman named Amy, calling about her husband's debt. "My husband died last month," she said, her voice shaking. "And now there's a man at my door saying I owe $20,000. I don't know what to do." Jake looked at Grace, sleeping peacefully in her bouncer, and thought about how different his life had become. "Ma'am, I'm going to help you," he said. "First thing you need to know is that you're not alone. And second, there are laws that protect people in your situation. Let me tell you about your rights." As Jake talked the woman through her options, Grace woke up and started fussing. He picked her up with one arm, holding her against his chest while he continued the phone call. She settled immediately, her small hand grabbing his finger. When Lisa came home an hour later, she found Jake still at the kitchen table, Grace asleep in his arms while he typed one-handed on his laptop. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing the top of Grace's head. "Good, I helped 3 people today." One woman was being harassed by collectors over her dead husband's debt. "Sound familiar?" Lisa smiled. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that sometimes when everything seems hopeless, someone unexpected might show up to help. I told her that people are capable of changing, of choosing to do the right thing even when it's hard." Lisa sat down beside him and Grace reached for her with sleepy eyes. "Is that what you think happened to us? Someone unexpected showed up?" Jake looked at Lisa, then at Grace, then at the life they'd built together from the ruins of tragedy and debt. "I think we showed up for each other. And I think we're going to keep showing up every day for as long as we're needed." Grace gurgled softly and Lisa laughed. "I think she agrees." Jake smiled, feeling more at peace than he had in years. "Then it's settled. We're a family."